1,000,000 men marched west. The greatest empire the world had ever known was poised to crush a scattering of free city-states. But in the summer of 480 BC, the fate of a continent, the fate of freedom itself, was not decided on a vast plain. It was decided at a choke point, a narrow mountain pass between rock and sea. This is the story of how 7,000 men changed history. The story begins a decade earlier, with a promise of vengeance. The Persian king Darius had been humiliated at the Battle of Marathon. Now his son, Xerxes I, inherited not just a throne, but a singular obsession: to burn Athens to the ground and bring Greece under the heel of the Achaemenid Empire. For 4 years, Xerxes prepared a force of biblical scale. He drained the treasuries of 20 nations. Engineers built a phenomenal bridge of ships across the Hellespont, a kilometer-wide causeway, so his army could march straight from Asia into Europe. Xerxes led this force, a king of kings, watching the endless tide of his soldiers, from the chariots of Libya to the cavalry of the steppes, as they swept westward, confident that the world was his for the taking. In Greece, the fear was paralyzing. Most city-states, seeing this terrifying display of power, sent the symbolic offering of earth and water, the tokens of surrender. But in the south, in a small, fierce land called Laconia, one man did not panic. King Leonidas of Sparta saw the truth. The Persian host was unstoppable in an open battle, but if their numbers could be neutralized, a stand could be made. The Spartans were an anomaly. From the age of 7, a Spartan boy was taken from his mother to live in the Agoge, a brutal, ceaseless military education. They were taught to endure pain, to never retreat, and that the only fear they should know was the shame of failure. They were the greatest fighting force the ancient world had ever produced. They were trained not just for war, but for the art of dying. Leonidas had a plan to find the one place where this discipline could matter most. That place was Thermopylae, the Hot Gates, a coastal pass only a few meters wide, where the sheer cliff face of Mount Calidromo dropped into the Malian Gulf. A perfect kill zone. When the call went out, only a few hundred men could be spared from Sparta due to a religious festival. Leonidas chose 300, the best of the best. Each one was a veteran, each the father of a living son. They were not chosen to win the battle, they were chosen to die in a way that would save Greece. When the 7,000 allied Greeks, men from Corinth, Phocis, Thespia, saw the size of the Persian camp, the doubt was palpable. Xerxes, utterly dismissive of this tiny force, sent a messenger to offer a final chance to surrender. The message was brief: lay down your weapons. King Leonidas's reply was even shorter, a phrase that would echo down the millennia, a declaration of defiant sovereignty. Come and take them. On the first day, Xerxes sent his less reliable troops, his Medes and Scythians, to clear the path. The Greeks, fighting in the phalanx, a bristling bronze shield wall, slaughtered them. The Persians were funneled into the narrow pass, unable to maneuver, their spears too short, their numbers meaningless. Xerxes was said to have leaped from his seat on the hill in astonishment. On the second day, Xerxes ordered in his ultimate weapon, the Immortals. These were the elite, 10,000 men who served as the king's personal guard. They surged forward. They fought with whips and arrows, daggers and axes. But the Spartans held. They fought with a chilling rhythm, shield against shield, spear thrust, a disciplined fake retreat, then a sudden, devastating countercharge. By the end of the day, the Immortals lay broken and bloody on the pass floor. The 300 were proving that skill and purpose could, for a time, defeat sheer force. But the victory was only temporary. At dusk, the impossible happened. A local Greek named Ephialtes, a man whose name has been synonymous with nightmare and betrayal ever since, approached Xerxes. He knew a secret: a treacherous goat-track path over the mountain that bypassed Thermopylae entirely. Xerxes immediately dispatched his best troops, thousands of Persians, up that path under the cover of darkness. At dawn on the third day, Leonidas received the grim news. The Persian horns were sounding not just in front, but behind them. The trap was sprung. The battle was lost. Leonidas was faced with a choice that would define his legacy. He ordered most of the Allied troops to retreat, to save themselves, to fight again. He ensured that the Greek world would have a rallying army, but he and his 300 Spartans stayed. They were joined by 700 brave Thespians who chose, unequivocally, to stand and die beside them for the sake of Greece. They were also accompanied by 400 Thebans. Thebes was a city leaning toward the Persian cause, and their presence here was always suspect. They stayed, not by choice, but because Leonidas held them as political hostages. When the final assault began, many of these Thebans broke rank and surrendered to the Persians, seeking mercy by claiming they had been forced to fight against their will. The Spartans and the Thespians, however, had no thought of surrender. As the sun rose over the third day, the last stand began. The remaining Greeks, knowing they were surrounded, launched a desperate, furious charge into the widest part of the pass. They fought with broken spears, then with swords, then with their bare hands. Leonidas himself fell amid the chaos, pierced by arrows, but his death only ignited greater fury among his men as they desperately fought to retrieve his body. The Persians closed in from all sides. The few remaining defenders, shattered but unyielding, retreated to a small hillock where they were finally brought down by a torrent of Persian arrows, an honor guard of their own deaths. By the time the last Spartan and Thespian warrior fell, the ground was carpeted with the bodies of thousands of Persians. When it was over, Xerxes had won the pass, but he had lost all moral authority. He ordered Leonidas's head mounted on a spike, a desecration meant to instill terror. It had the opposite effect. Thermopylae was a defeat, but it was a spiritual victory. It proved to every terrified Greek that the seemingly unstoppable Persian king was simply a man, and that his army was vulnerable. It bought the Greek fleet essential time to prepare. Just weeks later, that preparation would pay off. At the Battle of Salamis, the smaller, faster Greek fleet utterly destroyed Xerxes' navy. A year later, the remnants of the Persian army were crushed at Plataea. The tide of empire rolled back, and the shadow of Persia faded forever from the west. Today, a simple monument stands at the site of the ancient pass, bearing the words, "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie." They were few against many, but they fought for an idea, that freedom is worth dying for. And that is why the name Thermopylae means not defeat, but immortality.